Hey guys, and welcome to the first Shadow Priest guide of Battle for Azeroth. In this guide, I'm going to be covering the correct gear, talent choices, and playstyles to guide you through the new expansion. Shadow Priest has changed from what it once was in Legion. A lot of our damage has been shifted away from having to get high stacks of Void Form into a more consistent damage via Mind Blast and Void Bolt. We've also gained a little extra utility back. With the introduction of Azerite traits, choosing the correct spec falls heavily on what traits you are stacking. I'm going to be splitting this video up into two main builds that revolve around stacking two different traits to maximize damage and benefit the comp you are playing. These are the Auspicious Spirits build and the Mind Blast build. The Spirits build focuses on multi-dotting and spread pressure, whereas the Mind Blast build is all about your single target damage, so both will be viable depending a lot on which style of comp you are playing. For instance, if you are playing with a mage, you want to focus more on single target, and if you are playing with a warlock, it's all about multi-dotting. First, let's cover the Mind Blast build, as it's more than likely going to end up being the default, as the old Legion-esque gameplay appears to be a thing of the past. For this build, your talent should look like this. The main change from this build and the Spirits build is that you'll be wanted to take the talents that focus primarily on single target and mobility. The level 15, 60 and 100 talents are identical in both builds, so we'll discuss these later in more detail. The Mind Blast spec is built around stacking the trait Fort Harvester. This empowers your Mind Blast after casting Vampiric Touch. You are able to get this on two pieces of gear. However, with how gearing works, you may not be able to instantly get the gear you desire, so there is a backup trait in the form of Whispers of the Damaged, also giving an increase in damage on Mind Blast, stacking every time you Void Bolt, meaning your Mind Blast can end up doing some insane damage. First, let's start with the level 30 talents. We have a choice between Body and Soul, Sand Lane and Mania. Body and Soul gives you a speed increase when you shield either yourself or an ally, so is recommended with this build, as it can aid in assisting you land that much important Psychic Scream on the healer when required. For the level 45 talents, you will be wanted Twist of Fate. This is due to the fact that this build is primarily single target focused, so you often not be multi-dotting targets, so the extra globals saved via Misery are really not worth taking over the increased damage and execute Twist of Fate brings. Next up are the 75 talents. For this build, Shadow Word Death is the best option, as you are looking to score kills in small windows of burst. This talent will give you that last bit of finishing power you need, and synergizes well with Twist of Fate. Last up is the level 90 talents, where you have the choice of Lingering Insanity, Mindbender and Void Torrent. For this build, I like to take Mindbender, as it's a strong cooldown that gives you some increased insanity, as well as a little extra burst damage on a 1 minute cooldown. Void Torrent could be considered, but having to channel it and remain stationary while having the risk of being interrupted is a big drawback. PvP talents, however, do not change depending on what build you are playing, but more so what you are facing, so we'll cover all PvP talents in detail later in the video. Unlike Legion, stats once again matter in PvP, so making sure you are going for the correct secondary stats on gear is important to gain that edge. For both specs, your stats are different, however, both primarily focus on haste as a main stat, so making sure you are stacking haste as a Shadow Priest is important for faster dot ticks and globals. However, for this build, your stat priority should look like this. All enchants should be looking to maximize haste. As mentioned, this spec is focused on single target and is best played when in crowd control based comps, such as when paired with either a mage or a rogue. The general damage rotation is going to look like this. You'll be wanted to get first all of your dots up on the target. This is Vampiric Touch and Shadow Word Pain. Then look to secure some crowd control onto the enemy healer. Then you will want to use your Dark Ascension to enter Void Form. Use your Mindbender, and then Mind Blast into Void Bolt onto the target. Using Mind Flare as a filler, and reapplying your dots as required, and then finishing the target off with Shadow Word Death once he reaches sub 20%. Now you know the single target Mind Blast build, it's time to talk about the build which focuses more on spread pressure. The old Legion build almost. This will be the preferred build in Battlegrounds and Arena, where you will more than likely be looking to rot down the entire enemy team, such as when playing with a Warlock for example. For this build we're going to be focused primarily on one Azerite trait, and that is Spiteful Apparitions. It gives you a flat damage increase on your already hard hitting apparitions. You can stack this trait, meaning your apparitions are going to be a huge chunk of your overall damage. You can however only get it on 2 of your 3 pieces of gear. So as a secondary trait I recommend Chorus of Insanity. This will give you some extra crit once your void form ends, allowing you to gain more apparitions and to get back into void form faster. In this build our talent choices are going to be focused on one thing, and that's spread damage. For the level 30 talents, instead of the mobility that Body and Soul offers, we're going to opt to take Sand Lane. You don't need the added mobility from Body and Soul, as you'll be more than likely not moving, because you do not need to land fears onto healers as often, more so focusing on turreting damage, so the extra damage translate into more healing with Sand Lane. On the level 45 row, Misery is the best option, as the main focus of this build is to get as many vampiric touches out as possible. Having this also applies Shadow Word Pain to the target, so saves a huge amount of globals throughout a game. For the level 75 row, we have Auspicious Spirits. This is what defines this build, and is where a huge chunk of your damage as well as insanity generation comes from. Finally, for the level 90 row, it's best to take Lingering Insanity, as the main intention of this build is to deal the maximum damage. This talent will make your gameplay more fluid and allow you to quickly reapply dots and enter void form faster. Also, it will make you and any dots you already have tick faster, thus in turn giving you more Auspicious Spirits. As for stats for this build, you'll be wanting to again focus primarily on haste, but as a secondary stat you'll be wanting critical strike, while enchanting all gear again with haste. The main focus of this build is to do one thing, and that's spread pressure. Your main goal is to get Vampiric Touch and Shadow Word Pain on as many targets as possible, and to be in void form for as long as possible. So focus on getting dots out and then building up as much insanity as you can using Shadowy Insight procs as you get them, and void bolting off cooldown. While making sure to reapply dots before they fall off, and then using Mind Flay as a filler. Now let's cover the talents that don't change based on what build we are playing. For the level 15 talents, the best and only choice is Shadowy Insight. This talent is the same as what it was in Legion. Your Shadow Word Pain ticks give you a chance to reset the cooldown of your Mind Blast, and in turn make it instant. Compared to the other two options, this will give you the most overall damage and also the most instant cast damage, as well as insanity generation for both specs. Bear in mind, this is RPPM, which means you could have 10 Shadow Word Pains out, and you'll still get the same amount of procs as if you had only one out. In regard to the other two, Shadow Word Void offers a little extra damage, in trade-off for having to cast more. For PvP, more instant damage is always favoured. Fortress of Mind just flat out buffs Mind Blast and Mind Flay by 10%, and causes them to generate a little extra insanity. This is fine, but you still lose out in overall damage and instant cast, so again should never be taken. Next up is our level 60 Crowd Control tier. This tier is entirely dependent on what composition you are playing and what you need to bring to the table. Last Word reduces the cooldown of your silence, making it a 30-second cooldown, down from 45. Mind Bomb is a 6-second disorient that breaks on damage, and Psychic Horror is a 4-second stun on a 45-second cooldown. So take what your team needs. If you're playing with a rogue for example, they bring enough stuns, so the reduced cooldown on silence could greatly help in scoring a kill. However, if you're playing with a warlock who has no stuns, then Psychic Horror can help you lock down that target in place for you. Mind Bomb is more focused around PvE and should not be taken. Last up for talents is the choice between Legacy of the Void and Dark Ascension. With Surrender to Madness not being available in PvP, it leaves us with either Legacy or Dark Ascension. Legacy of the Void is now nerfed and doesn't give you any bonus damage, so Dark Ascension is the preferred choice for both builds, as it allows you to instantly enter Void form and generate 50 Insanity. This is great for setting up kills and also gives you more overall Insanity generation than Legacy of the Void otherwise would. Finally, we have PvP talents. You are now able to choose 3 talents as well as your trinket choice. For Shadow Priest, it's almost always recommended that you take Gladiator's Medallion. This gives you the most control of when you want to use your trinket to get you out of a crowd control, to either make a defensive play such as void shifting, or even to maintain your void form for an aggressive play. There is only really one honor talent I would consider baseline, and that is Void Origins. This makes your Void Eruption instant and allows you to enter void form on demand. For this, we have the option to add 2 more choices, depending on what we are facing and what composition we are playing. The best way of doing this is to cover all viable honor talents and what they do, and then you will have more of an idea on what honor talents you should be combining in conjunction with Void Origins. Starting off, we have Siphoned. This will summon a pet with 5 HP that will channel for its duration, dealing some damage and reducing healing taken by 50%. This is great for securing kills in a setup based comp, where you'll be looking to lock down your opponent with cross crowd control, giving them no chance of killing it, such as when playing with a mage or rogue. Also, for how to correctly use Siphon, you can check out my quick tip video. Pure Shadow makes your dispersion now a 95% damage reduction. This has become even more important now you do not gain the healing from old dispersion traits in Legion, so dying through dispersion is now even more of a possibility. This talent is great versus high burst damage single target comps where you would potentially run the risk of dying through dispersion. Void Shift will allow you to swap health with anybody on your team, adding an extra defensive for either you or anyone else on your team. This is great for when you feel you need an extra defensive to survive against the enemy team. Driven to Madness is great for when you will be the target of the enemy team but feel like you can still survive without the need for both Void Shift and Pure Shadow combined. This will give you more consistent Void forms and damage, allowing you to generate insanity when getting hit. Psychic Link gives you a little extra cleave damage and is great for creating more AoE pressure. Again, it can be a viable choice if you are not the main target of your enemy and feel like you need that little extra overall damage. Also, this talent is going to be the go-to for Battlegrounds. Shadow Mania can also be a viable choice in rare situations where you are getting crowd controlled consistently on your void forms via stuns and fears. So to quickly recap, your playstyle talent choices rely heavily on what composition and playstyle you are playing. Having the choice between an AoE multi-dot style using the Spirit build or the more single target Mind Blast spec. Remember, when gearing to be focused primarily on haste. Overall, Shadow Priests are looking to be in a decent spot going into battle for Azeroth. However, at the start you may not be able to get the correct Azerite traits for your spec, so just work with what you have. That just about sums up this 8.0 Battle for Azeroth Shadow Priest rundown. Thanks for watching and be sure to plus skill and leave a comment if you enjoyed.